From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Gulf Coast studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazan, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Not forget the Junior. Very important. Remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you're watching us on YouTube, please do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hi, hello, Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. And as we always say, please stay here. Let your friends know we are here on this wonderful network known as the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. It is Monday, Lundi Gras in the city of New Orleans. So if you were out and about over the weekend, and I don't blame you if you were because it was beautiful weather, hope you enjoyed yourself. I myself got out there for a couple hours on Sunday. Tote Sunday into Bacchus Sunday was a really good time, perfect weather. I was down there on St. Charles and Julia Street, the downtown portion of the parade route. So had a blast. Hope you had a blast too. We are back here on this Monday. It's interesting. It's, a Sunday without football, so a Monday without football. So now the weeks are going to start piling up. The off season is here and in full swing. And we have been talking about this position a lot. And we're going to get into it in a second, but just how much we feel like this team could use. We're going to put some names to the actual idea that we've been bringing out there. But first things first, how you feeling?
Feeling good, Sean. Like you said, it's Lundi Gras. It's a great time in the city. For those watching on YouTube, Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, I don't know if everyone everywhere necessarily celebrates Mardi Gras like we do in New Orleans. Like I know a couple of years ago I was working in Ohio and I was like,
yeah.
You mean y'all don't do king cakes? Y'all don't get time off? Nothing on Mardi Gras? But, hey, down here it is, purple, gold, and green everywhere. So that's always fun. And, another fun thing is what we've been doing the last few podcasts.
Yeah.
Really diving into the upcoming free agency class. We did, wide receivers that the Saints could take a look at. We did the top 5 running backs the Saints can take a look at. And now we're looking at the quarterback position, not the starting quarterback position, because we both believe the Saints have a great starter in Tyler Shough, but we're looking at the backup quarterback position, specifically a veteran backup, because one thing that we've talked about on this podcast in the past is that we are both in agreement that the Saints need a veteran backup, not one to start, not one to battle for Shough with the job, but one to help Shough in his development, and we really dive into that today.
We do, and look, it's one thing for us to talk about, hey, Saints need a veteran quarterback, Saints need a veteran quarterback. We've brought it up so many times on this show, on this platform, on the show that bears our name on Fox 8, on Black and Gold Review. I mean, we talk about this all the time. I have talked about this a lot. But you can't just talk about the idea of adding a veteran quarterback. We got some names, and I think it's very important to start wrapping your mind around some potential names for this position, because this position is a guy, it's funny, in other position groups and what we're looking for, the older that player is, the more of a negative you would see it as. But I think in this situation, age is not a problem. It could be a problem, but age is not the deciding factor. In fact, you want somebody that's a little seasoned for this role. You want somebody that, in my opinion, he's been through a lot. He understands his role, and he, if called upon, can deliver your team as close to 500 ball as possible. Those are you want to get as much of that criteria, at least in my opinion, as possible. So today, we're going to rank our top 5. We haven't seen the lists, just like we did with wide receivers, just like we did with running backs. We're going to do it with backup quarterbacks. So I'll start. Go ahead.
Sean said the importance of backup quarterbacks. I've said the importance of backup quarterbacks. In case you don't want to listen to us and say, hey, the Saints don't need a veteran. They've got Kellen Moore and Scott Tolzien and Doug Nussmeier and everybody. Don't listen to us. Listen to a guy you may recognize by the name of Drew Brees. Yeah. Drew Brees recently sat down with Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce, a guy who's going into the Hall of Fame in August, a surefire Hall of Famer in Travis Kelce, and someone who will probably be a Hall of Famer in Jason Kelce. A lot of football knowledge between the three of them. And Drew Brees said himself that the NFL does a lot of their young quarterbacks a disservice. And he talked about 2 theories about getting your young quarterback ready. Number 1 is having 50 quality starts from college to the NFL. And the second one is having, Drew Brees' words, not ours, a great veteran backup or sitting behind a veteran starter. Drew Brees talked about the time he sat behind Doug Flutie. You know, Tom Brady sitting behind, you know, the veteran in New England when he first got the job. Drew Bledsoe, you know, and Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Jordan Love to Aaron Rodgers. So many quarterbacks who, you know, sat behind quarterbacks or waited or at least had a great veteran backup in the room. And Drew has been vocal about the importance of a veteran backup, not a coach, but a player specifically. So that's why we felt like it was important to dive into this top 5 today.
Yeah, and like I said before, we can't just throw out generic ideas. I mean, on this show, we're going to get as specific as possible. And this is where all the legwork comes in, because you're having to find names, you're having to look at names, and you're trying to project if those names can fit and fulfill the criteria that we were talking about. So I'll just go in at number 5. This was a toss-up for number 5. And I went back and forth. There was 2 guys with Super Bowl rings. 2 guys played a lot of football. 2 guys that are no longer starters. What sold it for me was, I think one guy is a little more in the right headspace to accept that, and I think the other guy probably wants one more crack at it. So that's where I went. Number 5, Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is old. He's 41 years old for a quarterback. He's not old for regular life, but old for a quarterback. 41 years old. He's a guy that he won 2 games last year for 2 different teams. A couple years before that, he led the Cleveland Browns at the back end of a season to the playoffs. He's a guy that, and he joined in midseason. He's a guy that I think he's a wealth of knowledge. I mean, all those young guys in Cleveland last year before he was traded, they seem to look up to him. He seems to be perfectly fine with the OG label, perfectly fine with, hey, if I need to mentor these guys, I can do it. I'll tell them what I'm seeing. I'll show them what I'm seeing. And given the rate of injury to the quarterback position in the NFL, which I don't know what the study is, but it just feels like it's going up, I think if he had to hand the ball for 4 games, he's at least getting you 1 win, maybe 2, and that could be the difference between that team making the playoffs and that team not making the playoffs. So at number 5 for me, I'm going with 1, Joe Flacco. What about you?
I mean, Joe Flacco is someone who we've seen win. We've seen him play at a high level. He technically was a Pro Bowler this year, and the way that Shedeur Sanders, talked about Joe Flacco and the impact that he had early in his, season in Cleveland, it was like a father-son between the 2 of them almost. So Joe Flacco makes a lot of sense. Now for my number 5, I went with the guy who actually is playing the veteran backup role right now, and he actually had to step in and start last season in Washington, and that's Marcus Mariota.
Okay.
We saw Marcus Mariota play this last season. Now, Marcus Mariota as a quarterback is never going to wow you. He didn't necessarily wow you when he was a 2nd overall pick out of Oregon. He's not going to wow you in the veteran backup, but he's a guy who's seen a lot of football. He's played a lot of football. He's seen a lot of different coaches, a lot of different systems. So as a mentor, as somebody who not only can talk about, the passing aspect, but also the running aspect of the game, protecting yourself. Because one thing about Marcus Mariota, the way that he played, he didn't take a lot of big hits, which is why we are still able to talk about Marcus Mariota playing the game at age 33, 34 years old. So when I was going through the backups, there were a lot of people who were just outside of my list because I feel like they still have aspirations of being a starter in this league. I think Marcus Mariota is very comfortable where he is in his career. He's happy to be in the NFL. He knows nobody's going to tap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, we want you to lead us to the Super Bowl. And he's content with helping to lead the next generation. And I think his experience could help Tyler Shough at number 5 on my list. Marcus
Mariota, he was someone I strongly considered. If we were doing maybe a top 8 or a top 7, I probably would have had him on mine, but I didn't. He did not crack my top 5, but he was someone I had under consideration. And honestly, I wouldn't have a problem. If that's the way they turned, I would not have a problem. All right, number 4 for me is an interesting guy because this guy has basically he's lived the backup his whole career, but he's exactly what I talk about, where he he understands who he is, and he's successful at what he does based off who he is. The only drawback I had on this player was he's done it for so long for one guy, and that is Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley is only 28 years old. His last 2 seasons, he's gone 4-3. Now, I know he was at Miami, I think, before. He did a lot with Baltimore. At one point, he left Baltimore, and he came back to Baltimore. Right. And look, he kind of helped kind of stabilize their season a little bit when Lamar went down, because another guy I used to love, a backup quarterback, Cooper Rush, couldn't get the job done in Baltimore. But Tyler Huntley is a guy that always seems to do so. He understands his role. He has proven he can win games. He has proven that he is a guy that's going to embrace the role and everything that comes with it. Clearly, he's somebody that teams trust in the room, because everybody generally has ambitions to start, especially when you haven't even hit 30 yet. But I think he's kind of carved out this lane for himself that he's really been successful at. My only drawback is the majority of the time it's for Lamar Jackson. He would not be backing up a Lamar Jackson. Now, Tyler Shough is a guy that's very mobile and athletic, and maybe depending on, and Kellen Moore is certainly a guy that is certainly smart enough to craft a game plan and get something out of a guy like Tyler Huntley, even though that's not the exact skill sets. But I think if you somehow were able to land a player of his caliber at the number 2 position at quarterback, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. So checking in number 4 for me is Tyler Huntley.
Tyler Huntley was one of the ones that was just outside of my list because, like you mentioned, he's been backup for so long, but he's only 28 years old. Right. 28 isn't necessarily old in the quarterback world. I mean, the Saints starting quarterback is darn near 28, and it just feels like he's never really gotten that shot at the starter. I don't know if he still has aspirations to be that one day for, the right team, even to get a Geno Smith-esque opportunity, So because of that, he was just outside on my list. My number 4, though, on paper, he fits the bill. When you're thinking about someone who has played at the highest level in this league, who has a wealth of experience, who has played in, some great offenses under some great coaches. That's Russell Wilson. The only problem with Russell Wilson, I think Russell Wilson's past the point in his career where anybody's going to tap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, you're the starting quarterback for our team. But Russell Wilson is a presence. Yes. It's the same reason why teams shied away from Cam Newton as a backup, back in the day. It's true. Russell Wilson, when he comes to town, he's not somebody who's just going to sit in the back of the room and mind his business. Russell Wilson is going to take control and be the vocal leader of your team, whether you want him to or not. He's bringing Sierra, one of the biggest, pop R&B stars on the planet, with him. Russell Wilson and his pregame routines and his speeches and just the way he carries himself, the way that he works out, the way that he just exists. Russell Wilson is a really big personality. And I looked at the Giants last year, and I look at obviously we only see so much, but you look at how Jackson Dart is around Jameis Winston, and look how he is with Russell Wilson. Yeah. It seems like he's a lot closer to Jameis Winston, and both of them were kind of that quote-unquote veteran backup for Jackson Dart. So on paper, when you're talking about a veteran quarterback, has he seen it all when it comes to football? Yes, he has. If something happens to your starter, can Russell Wilson step in and play well enough to win you games? Yes. Yes, he can. He checks all of those boxes. My only hesitation and why he's lower on this list for me is because he's such a large presence, and I don't know how that fits into the backup role. Well, when I said it was a toss-up for number 5, Wilson was the other guy, because I went back and forth. I scratched one name out, I put it back on, and you articulated that well in terms of the presence, and I just think Russell probably has it in his head he's going to get one more crack as a starter, and he may get it, he may not, but if you have that kind of presence as a backup, I can understand why there would be a little bit of hesitation, but also if there's a willingness when you go to sign a player like that and an acceptance, and you're confident in that acceptance, then it could be a fairly low-risk type situation. As long as he doesn't distract from that's what you got going on. And he's a guy. He's kind of viewed as almost like a little corny a little bit. He's not viewed as Cam is such a huge presence. But Russell's he's a different kind of presence. So it'd be interesting how that would sort of
play itself out if that were to happen. But
Absolutely.
that'd be interesting. All right, number 3 for me. Okay, I kind of equate this player to Mac Jones.
Okay.
And I know it doesn't necessarily check the box of knows exactly who you are. I do think this player probably wants to start again. But given the success we just saw with a Mac Jones, and given the journey this guy has taken, I put him on here. And like I said, this is a very subjective list. It's very, you can talk yourself into and out of a lot of these guys. Yeah. You're talking about the number 2 quarterback. You're talking about a player you hope you never have to see. But what sold it for me was he's 16-11 as a starter, or when he starts. His name is Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, and I think one of his years, Kellen Moore was his offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. Yep. Kenny Pickett has not, he was drafted as a first-round pick. It didn't work in Philly, didn't work in Pittsburgh, went to Philly, was a backup, then went to, heck, he was with Cleveland, then got traded again, right, to the Raiders?
To the Raiders.
So he's bounced around a little bit, and he has kind of fallen into a little bit of that Mac Jones category. When we saw what happened with Mac Jones, when Mac Jones came here, we saw what happened.
Oh, yeah,
so
we did.
I know Kenny Pickett still wants to play again, and perhaps that should cancel him out. But when I saw the win-loss record, and I know the connection to Kellen Moore, I thought, man, that would not be as bad as, because I don't know if he's got enough skins on the wall to really come in and disrupt and be like, no, I'm battling for this job. I think it's been pretty well documented. Tyler Shough has this job. You got to be someone you can count on when your opportunity arises if something happens to Tyler Shough. So Kenny Pickett, an interesting name, a guy I liked when he came out of Pittsburgh. His career has not panned out. But wins and losses are wins and losses, and he's got 16 wins as a starter over 4 years at 16-11. I think that's nothing to just shake your head at. He does have 16 touchdowns and 16 picks, which is why he's not a full-time starter right now. But he might be the perfect guy, the perfect number 2 for the rest of his career.
Kenny Pickett is an interesting name. He was right outside of my list for me. And we were talking about Kenny Pickett around this time last year because Kellen Moore had just got hired as the Saints coach, and we were looking at quarterbacks the Saints could bring in to either compete with Spencer Rattler at the time. Tyler Shough wasn't here yet, or maybe to serve as a veteran-type backup for him. And Kenny Pickett's a name we both threw out a lot. So, looking at Kenny Pickett, the reason I kept him off my list is because, I mean, he's fresh off his rookie deal.
Right.
I think he does, want to be a starter again. Yeah. I think he's looking at Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl and saying, man, that could be me. You know, right coach, right chance, right moment, right place. But I also shied away from Kenny Pickett because the worst quarterback of all the quarterbacks that played last season that I saw play was Geno Smith in Las Vegas. And somehow, some way, Geno Smith kept strutting out there as a starting quarterback.
No doubt.
Kenny Pickett couldn't. They were watching Geno Smith stink it up every year, and they would not put Kenny Pickett in to start over Geno. So that also kind of shied me away from Kenny Pickett because I'm like, what did they see? So for my number 3, it's our first shared player. I went with Joe Flacco.
Okay.
Pro Bowler, like I said earlier, technically this year. My only concern with Joe Flacco is what you kind of touched on. Is he playing to be a backup? I think at one point he was very content with the backup role, but every time he settles into being a backup, one thing leads to another, and he winds up starting. I mean, you look at Cleveland. He comes off the couch and leads Cleveland to the playoffs, and he's like, oh, I still got it a little bit. Then he goes to the Colts to back up. I believe it was Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, he's starting in Indianapolis. Yeah. And then he goes to the Browns. And next thing you know, he's starting in Cleveland. You go over to Cincinnati. You're starting in Cincinnati. Everywhere he goes, it's like you go there with the intention of being the backup, and somehow he winds up the starter. So either he's incredibly bad luck, or there's still a part of him that enjoys, actually playing football. Now, on paper, like I said with Russell Wilson, he's played this game at the highest level. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's been, on the biggest stages. He's played with great players on offense and defense. He's got a wealth of NFL knowledge that he could pour into a player like Tyler Shough. So on paper, he checks all the boxes. It's just at this point in Joe Flacco's career, being 41, 42 years old, are you getting out of bed every day to sit in meeting rooms and back up, a young guy? Or are you only coming because you have an opportunity to play?
Yeah, all legitimate questions. But I think it does speak to the respect he's earned that he keeps getting calls.
Yeah.
Despite being 41, he keeps getting calls. All right, number 2. We saw this player last year, and for a while he was a little out of sight, out of mind. And this was a guy that when he first came in the league, I mean, you thought he was going to be one of the faces of the league. I mean, you just did. Didn't work out for him. Kind of meandered his way through some interesting circumstances. But in the end, the last 2 seasons, he's got a 2-3 record, and there is no doubt anymore. He is a backup quarterback. He is a veteran backup quarterback. Any time devoted to competing for the starter should not be a thing for this player. But he can be a very good backup. He's a very football smart guy, football IQ. Can certainly help in that regard and has seen a lot and has been through a lot. That is Carson Wentz. I got him as my number 2 potential backup quarterback. Again, he's been through a journey. He had just signed a big contract, and they drafted Jalen Hurts in Philly. And then there was the reports about him being a bad leader, this and that. I think at one point he was out of football, came back. So I think, and if called upon, I think it was in Minnesota last year, he was able to win a couple games for Minnesota, despite the up and down nature of what was happening with J.J. McCarthy. I think he's a guy that, I know he got injured last year. I know he's a guy that's battling some injury. But I do think at this stage of his career, he better understand where he's at. He's 33 years old. He's not a franchise quarterback anymore, and no one is going to allow him to be the franchise quarterback anymore. But if you can turn to him in a 5-game span, if he gets you to 2-3, that's what a backup quarterback does. If you turn to a backup quarterback for double-digit games, your season's probably over anyway. But in a tight window, can he do enough to help you win? And when he doesn't have to play, is he doing enough to help your young quarterback? I think Carson Wentz can check all those boxes.
Walking here, my number 1 and number 2 players, I had them set, and literally on the walk to the studio, I swapped them.
All right.
My number 2 player, a name you guys know well, Teddy Two Gloves.
Teddy all right.
Bridgewater, because he checks all the boxes. He knows he is a backup. He is secure in the fact that he's a backup. He's played a lot of football. He's shown in the past in this city he could step in and win you games. The only reason I had to hesitate on Teddy Bridgewater and bump him down 1 slot is that I can't definitively say he can still play at that level. Teddy Bridgewater was out of football for a few years. From a personality, from a mentor, from an older veteran presence. He is everything you would want to sit behind Carson Wentz. And if it was just that, he'd be number 1. But excuse me, not Carson Wentz, Tyler Shough. But if something happens to Shough and you need to plug Teddy Bridgewater, and we saw him go 5-0 a few years ago, that was a few years ago. Teddy Bridgewater was out the NFL for a few seasons, coaching high school football. He came back, but he really didn't have an opportunity to play much when he came back. I can't say with confidence that Teddy Bridgewater can step in and win you games. So that's what dropped him for number 2 on my list. But as a veteran presence, I think he's perfect.
I had Bridgewater on my initial list, but then the criteria kind of forced me to resettle it. And he would, like I said, if it was maybe a top 7 or top 8, he would have made the list. But I love Teddy. I loved covering him when he was here. He was a blast to deal with. He was a great dude. And that 5-0 run was unbelievable because I'm telling you, there was some fear, some legitimate fear when Drew went down that year, and he calmed everyone's fears, and they went 5-0. You were just hoping for maybe 3-2 or 2-3. He got you 5-0. And I remember even at the time it was almost like, hey, maybe let Drew sit one more week, to get into the bye week, and let's roll with Teddy one more week. But they ended up going with Drew, and obviously they did what they had to do. All right, my number 1 player. I have talked about him a lot for backup quarterback. I think personally over the last half decade, he's the best backup quarterback in the NFL. I had fear of him when he got injured last year, that perhaps it was going to take him into the offseason where he wouldn't be ready to start the season. But I have since double-checked on that, and it says, that's what I was checking earlier, and it says that there was no ACL tear. He is back to full strength. He is 30 years old. He has been a guy who has been a spot starter backup, spot starter backup, spot starter backup. He's got a 9-14 record over the last 3 years. He is, in my opinion, the best backup quarterback in the NFL, and he's available. His name is Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, Money Minshew, not good enough to be the everyday guy, every week guy, but good enough to help you in a pinch. A very smart guy, very adaptable. He's been in a bunch of different systems over the last few years, knows exactly who he is, and the injury isn't as bad as initially thought, because it was a torn ACL late in the game. You're talking September maybe by the time he's fully back up to strength, which I'm not sure would do a whole lot of people any good. But if it's going to be fine for free agency, everything's going to be all good for the start of training camp and everything else. Gardner Minshew I've always liked Gardner Minshew. I've always thought he was the best backup quarterback in the league because he understands exactly who he is, and he's 30 now, so he's not a young guy anymore. So he's a guy, or he'll turn 30. He has enough experience to pass on the wisdom when he's not playing, and when he has to get on the field, he can get you to some wins. Now, he's going to play some bad ball as well, but he's going to do enough scrappiness to get you to the amount of victories that you need in a tight window. So Gardner Minshew comes in at my number 1 backup quarterback.
My number 1 is your number 2.
Okay.
I switched at the last second. Carson Wentz.
Okay.
Because when I think back on Carson Wentz's peak, his peak is higher than any quarterback we've named today.
No doubt.
Russell Wilson was in the Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl. Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl. Mariota Heisman. Carson Wentz's peak, he was the MVP that season before tearing his ACL and PCL, and he was never the same after that. But before that, look at his style of play. Who does he play like?
He does play a lot like him.
He plays a lot like
It's
Tyler Shough plays now. So putting Carson Wentz in a room with Tyler Shough, I think would help Tyler Shough a lot. He's 33, a lot of football knowledge. And look at the games he played this year. He threw for 300 yards twice this season against 2 playoff teams in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So if you need him to step in and win games, he can do that for you. You need him to sit back and mentor Tyler Shough. There's a lot of light between those two. I think he could do that too. I got Carson Wentz.
He's on the Wentz wagon.
Yes,
I like him
sir.
too. That was fun. It's an interesting list. Let us know in the comments what you think. We got to get out of here, man.
Time
right up against the
flies.
clock. All right. Andre Johnson, Jr., Sean Bazan. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.